Hello, everyone. We have today a guest called Karlie from Bali Buddies. She runs a travel website.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe you're better describing what you do than
It is a hard one. It took me a while to figure out what to call the business because it was all accidental how it came about. But yeah, now I call it like a Bali guide, a guide to Bali, a digital Bali guide. Anything like that works.
the Bali Guide. And how did you? When did you started this digital Bali Guide?
It literally was a business by accident. 9 years ago, we were living in Australia, in central Queensland. I was a teacher, and my husband at that time was working in the mines. And it's when Facebook first started getting popular for businesses. And at that time, I had lots of people. We'd always traveled to Bali before we were together and after we were together, and 3 kids and everything. And we had done a lot of stays in private villas. And at that stage, the travel agencies wouldn't cover private villas because there was not enough availability for them. So you kind of had to do your own research and find them. So we were always getting questions from friends and friends of friends asking, what villa did you stay in? And so when Facebook pages came about, I kind of just made this page called Bali Buddies, and I was just putting my tips up on there and saying to my friends, oh, well, I've got all the information on there. And then I started, like within, I think about 5 weeks, I started getting all of these inquiries and people wanting me to help plan their holidays. And so I messaged one of my friends and said, hey, George, if I have people who want to stay in your villa, I don't want it to cost them anymore, but can you pay me your commission? Because then that will justify me spending time on helping people with their holidays. And he was like, yeah, Karlie, that's what's called being a travel agent. And I'd never, as a teacher, because you're not really in business, right? I'd never really even thought about how travel agents made their money.
Yeah.
And so from there, I learned how to be a travel agent, and I employed a travel agent to help me. And for the first couple of years of Bali Buddies, that's all we did was booking travel holidays. But of course, the strategy of getting clients was social media, Instagram and Facebook. And our channels started to grow really quickly, and our website visitors were really going up. And, back then our website was terrible. And then I started getting emails from different businesses saying, we'd like to work with you. How can we advertise with you? And I really had no idea about running a media business, but I learned. And then that's fast forward. That's where we are today, is that we still have the travel agency in Australia. But I own it, but I don't work in that side of the business. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's nothing going on in it right now. But I work full time in the Indonesian company, the media business of Bali Buddies.
Okay, so talking about that, I think it's quite interesting, your business model. How did you have to adapt in these current circumstances?
Yeah, so this one was a big challenge. The first big challenge is in the travel agency business. It's based out of Australia. Is we had so much refunding to do, like hundreds of thousands of dollars of refunding. And as agents, you don't have that money. You take the booking, you keep your commission, and you pass the rest on to where you're booking. So it was a lot of negotiations with villas and hotels to get our clients' money back. And then the second part of that is there were so many businesses going bankrupt at the same time. So there is no money once a business goes bankrupt. We just happened to be very lucky that we paid for all of those bookings on our company credit cards. So we got to claim our clients' money back through credit card insurance. So the first couple of months of COVID and the no travel was really concentrating on the travel side of the business. And then, of course, the media side of the business, all the venues were closed. And even as they started to reopen, there's no market. There's no money to mind the pouring rain behind me now. Bali wet season. If the sound goes bad, let me know and I'll move. Is that too bad? The sound?
But it's probably going to start raining here very soon as well.
It's like just started. We had a sunny morning. It's just started pouring. Um, and even when budget has come back, it's obviously significantly less than before. The other challenge for me is although we had a very diverse audience, our key bulk of our audience was the Australian market, which was great when the Aussies were traveling to Bali. But what I had to do was find a way to keep that business going while we have no Australians traveling to Bali. So then I really started to focus on the expat markets within not just Bali, but the whole of Indonesia, and gaining those people as my audience, and also other Indonesians outside of Bali who needed guidance on where to go, where to eat, where to stay in Bali. So I focused a lot on doing that, and that's where our focus still is at the moment, because those people are traveling and those people are spending, and they're the people that my clients want to get their products shown to.
I think it's really amazing. I think you actually, I've spoken to you before many times, and I think you're super smart. Really, when I talk to you in business matters and stuff, you're incredibly smart. And I think you've been super busy, even though everything has like gone at that under. You've been like busier than ever, getting out there, doing a million things, and your name has really flourished during these times, because I think in the past there was many kind of competitors with you, and them have just disappeared, and you really stayed on and pivoted to do all these things and getting out there and being seen everywhere, which is
sorry to cut you off. I think the other thing, and that's what I forgot to say, that really helped during this time was that is true what you just said. A lot of the other foreign media who are here in Bali left pre-COVID, and most haven't come back, and they either kind of really dropped off on doing any promotion of Bali, or they are not really connected as closely to the island anymore, so they don't really know what's going on. Whereas we stayed, and that's been a lot of the work that I've done with my clients during this time is, if it's a villa or a resort or whatever, is we actually go and stay there to show people what it's like to stay there. And the health protocols, what it's like. Is it still open and operating? Is it still fun? Can you still access lots of things off the menu? Because these are all challenges that we've never even had to worry about when it comes to Bali, right? You used to everything being open, but you know what it's like now. You have to get on and check and see, are these people open or are they closed? Do they still have a decent menu running? So that's where we've really been able to add value to our clients.
Yeah, no, and it shows. I really feel like your business in the last year, it was a great move for you to stay, because I think when there's a big crisis, there is you this swim or sink. Was it sink or swim?
Sink or swim, yeah.
And you're like, you didn't just swim, you were like crawling in butterflies.
No, I think that's just, but I have this conversation with a lot of the marketing staff of a lot of the hotels, right? Is that's exactly what, the conversations we've been having is either you adapt or you die in this market. And I see it for myself, like financially, we're making nowhere near what we were making pre-COVID, but relationship building wise, it's been a really solid time for my business to be able to work with some clients that I've never worked with before and show them what we can do, and build a relationship with them that I know is going to hold us in good stead, that when travel comes back, I'm not really worried about the money side of it, because I know I will be rewarded on the other side.
I think that's a really interesting point. I think obviously we all need to make money, and especially in crisis time where there's less money around, we all need to survive. But I think looking at the long term of of your business. It's not about getting the money now. It's instead, okay, let's just build a relationship. The money will come eventually. And I'm very like that in my business as well. I think you just have to just think the long game. And there's so many people, and I've encountered lots, they really look at the short game and they have no long view of their business, and they end up stabbing themselves in the back because like you need to look at it long term. And I think Bali is a place of relationships and building communities and building ties with people. And I think if you can do that, then you can be really successful here. And I think that's what's one of your advantages.
Yeah, and that's definitely been that's definitely my goal during this time, is to not look at the short game. The short game's obviously scary, right? Nobody knows when this is going to end. Things change so quickly. But I'm just looking at the long-term game, and as long as we've got enough money to survive, you don't need to be making and you've got the bonus of everything being cheaper on the island at the moment also, right? So it kind of levels off. You're not making as much money as you used to, but there are like crazy deals and everything's cheaper, and we've been really conscious about trying to spread our spend around to support as many businesses as we can during this time. Because at the end of the day, we want them to still be open. We don't want to see them close their doors either.
Yeah, and I think that's true. I think we all, I don't know, everyone that I know lives in Bali. Even though we don't have a lot of money, we still want to support people, because we're like, we don't want shops to close and we don't want restaurants to close. So we're like, we'll just go, and even if it's on a cheaper day, but it's a way of supporting them, and just we want Bali to be successful. I think as a community,
that's right,
and we want it to be open, so
exactly. And you don't want to see closed down places everywhere. So that's definitely something I've been really focused on during this time, is what money we are spending is to try and spread it around, and just give little bits of support here and there.
Yeah, I think that's correct. So I wanted to ask you, tell me a little bit about your life before you came to Bali. What you talk about teaching. Tell me about what life used to be before.
What the Aussie life was like. So I grew up in a smaller town in central Queensland called Moranbah. My dad was on the blast crew in the coal mines there, and I was really young when I went to school. I don't know why, but I was younger than everyone else. And so I finished school when I was 16 and then wanted to be a teacher. So I had to move like 6 hours away from my house to go to university to learn to be a teacher, which is terrifying at the moment because my eldest daughter is turning 16 this year. And I just think, oh my goodness, I can't believe I was leaving home, not too much older than her. And went and studied. All I ever had wanted to be was a teacher since I was little. And so went and studied to be a teacher. During university, I met my husband, who was in the army. And then I got a job still in Townsville where I went to university and started teaching. We got married. I only full-time taught in a classroom for 3 years because I ended up moving into a role called curriculum coordination, where I would plan with all of the teachers. I would oversee their planning, which was kind of really intimidating because some of these teachers have taught for 30 years, but there was a new style of curriculum coming in, and that taught me a lot about dealing with people and respecting and kind of being more of a moderator in that role. That I obviously know they knew way more than me about teaching, but I knew a lot more about the new curriculum. So it was just helping them navigate their way through that. And then we had our first baby, and then it was getting a bit scary in the army. There were so many trips away all of the time, and Brady was always away for like 8 months or 6 months. And so when Krista came along, our first one, we went, it's probably time to give up the army life. And that's when, by that time my father had passed away, but my brothers were still working in the mines, and it was a big mining boom. And they're like, look, you can come out here and make, triple what you're earning in the army. My mum still lived there. So we were like, oh, the kids are little, let's go back and live there and save some money. So we went back there, had the second baby, had Cameron, our second daughter. And, you know, life was pretty easy. I was relief teaching. So on Brady's days off from the army, I would go and teach. It was great money. It was easy. But I've since realized I'm a person that doesn't really like easy or routine because I get itchy. I get itchy feet. It was just too predictable, right? Like it was almost just too easy. And you know, so I ended up at one stage there. I had 4 different jobs and once again, I'm not motivated by money. So it wasn't about the money. It was about the challenge, and it was about trying something new. And yeah, and then the business came about accidentally. And even when I started it and came into travel, I never would have in a million years thought that we would have moved to Bali. But it was kind of a culmination of a lot of things. I was starting to lose a bit of faith that the education system was really what our kids need in this modern era. I was finding because I was still doing relief teaching and going there, and I was like, wow, there's just so much wasted time, and school really hasn't changed, you know, over the last 200 years. It's kind of exactly the same, right? We still go to a classroom, we line up and hands up, and I was starting to get really icky feelings about that for my kids, for my choice. I'm not saying that if anybody else still loves that, but for me, I was like, that's not what I wanted. And I also felt like the kids were growing up before my eyes. I was like, you know, once they got to school in Australia, we were so busy. It was wake up, go to school, drop off, you know, pick up, go to gymnastics, go to dancing, come home, cook the dinner, put the washing on, spend the weekend cleaning the house. And I was like, our weeks are just going and going, and these girls are getting bigger and bigger. And you know, pretty soon it's going to be time for them to move out. And I feel like it's going too quickly. And then that's when I started putting serious thought into, well, the business is going well, you know, perhaps we can move over to Bali. And yeah, and so from when we decided, it probably took about 8 or 9 months. And it was the big cleansing experience of we sold everything. You could imagine by that stage we'd been together like 17 years or something. You know, we sold everything. We were like, no, if we're moving with a couple of suitcases, and that's it. And so we sold everything we owned and just kept maybe 5 boxes that we put at Brady's parents' house. And over we came, rented a villa for a year, and started Bali life from there.
So how do you compare now your old life in Australia to your now life in Bali? What is a day? Maybe what is a day or a week in your life in Bali? That would be a picture.
Unrecognizable to my life in Australia, actually. I always get asked this, like, what are the pros, what are the cons and things. And it's hard to say this without people being judgy, but as a mum, having domestic help in your house is life-changing. Like that is the biggest life-changing thing ever. It makes me a much nicer wife, a much nicer mother, because when we moved over, I hadn't anticipated even getting somebody full-time in the house, but the villa we rented, we had a lady working in there, and it was pretty much if we didn't keep her employed, she had to move back to her village, and she didn't have a job. Yeah. And so I was like, we can afford it, so of course we'll keep her on. I'm not going to put her out of a job. And whoa, I couldn't imagine not having Dewi now, because she comes 4 hours a day, 6 days a week, but she's part of our family. She doesn't speak English, so it forced me to learn Bahasa, which was another really, I'm really appreciative actually that she didn't speak English, because it's made my Indonesian so much better. But not having to worry about that, oh, I've got to clean the house, or I've got to get that washing done, or I haven't put that away, or it really just frees up your time to have so much more fun with the kids, you know, because when I would have been washing and cleaning, we're like, let's go for a bike ride down the beach. So that's been definitely a big game changer, because in Australia you don't grow up. You might, if your mum works, you might have a cleaner for 2 hours a week that comes in while you're at school and cleans the house, but you don't have like staff that are here every day helping. So for me, that was like something that's completely changed the way we live. What I decided to do with the kids for school is I put them into distance education in Australia. So they do all of their school, even before Corona, they do all of their school online. And they actually start school at 6 o'clock in the morning because it's 8 o'clock in the morning in Brisbane where their school is. So that took a little bit of getting used to, but now we love it. So we're up at like 5:30. The kids start school in their pajamas, but they're at their desks and everything. I usually go for a walk down the beach because I have the beach really close here, and then come back and make breakfast. And then it depends. My days can just be all so different. If it's a home day and I don't have any meetings on or anything, I will work for the morning. The kids are finished school by 12, so we generally all have lunch together, and then they're off doing all of they pretty much have something on most days, sports or different things that they do, and then they're off. So I'll either just keep working from home or go to a cafe and work or something like that. And then dinner, it's either during the weeks we try to cook mostly. Sometimes we order in. But yeah, if that's a home day, but then other days like today, I've done all that in the morning, but then I've got a meeting at a hotel next, so I'll go and have a meeting there. Tonight we've got dinner at a friend's house for Chinese New Year. But the days can really be so different. Like last week I was in Ubud for 2 days working with a new resort there. So the kids and Brady were here and I was up there for a couple of days. In a couple of weeks, we're going to Sumba to work with a hotel over there. So the kids will stay here with the nanny and we'll go over to Sumba for the 3 days. And so it's really kept my
rest of your life.
It's amazing, but it is quite funny that we're at the stage where the kids they're highly involved in the business. Obviously most of the time they're coming with us, but now as they're getting quite older, they don't want to go away all the time, and they're like, no, we're not going there with you. We want to stay here. We want to like go to jiu-jitsu. And so it's a lot of negotiating and balancing there, that sometimes, I'll go off and do it by myself, or sometimes Brady and I will go and do it, or other times the kids, like this weekend we've got Lembongan, so the kids will come with us for the weekend. But it's definitely a negotiation through it. But yeah, it's wildly different to being a teacher.
That's it. You said you were getting, before in your life you get easily bored. Are you bored, or you still find it challenging?
There's just no way I can be bored now. There's no way, because it's something new every day, or I'm working with a different kind of business every day. And quite often what happens is we work with them to help them promote their products, but then you form relationships and then you start talking about, oh, you could do this in here, or you can do that in here. And I think that I find myself doing that all the time. And I really think that is the once a teacher, always a teacher. You can't help but still teach where you can. And I generally always have a couple of interns as well. And so that kind of really gives me my teaching fix. I love when the interns come and work and I can teach them the insides of the business, and they just learn so much in the months that they're with me.
Wow, that's so cool. It's I think it's, as you said, you get lots of questions from lots of people of like what it's like to live in Bali, and it's a really hard. I had so many fears before coming to Bali, I think as a person that's thinking of moving, they're like, oh, what about and you're like, what should I pack in the for baby, especially if you have babies, should I pack this, should I pack that? And it's really like when you come here, you realize all the stuff that people sell you in the Western world. Oh, you need this and you need this. You actually don't need any of it.
And it's so true, and a hard balance, because when we left and we turned up with just suitcases, it was honestly the best feeling of my life. Like I just felt, literally like you got rid of your baggage. Like we literally got rid of everything. And it's like, oh, we're so free. Like we own 5 suitcases. It's like we're literally so free. But then, of course, as you start to make a life, you add back into that. Like we've got pets now, and of course more. We've moved villas, so we have more furniture and things like that. But it has taught me to be, because I went through that shedding experience. It's taught me to be really mindful about consumerism and not just buying things because somebody else has it or because it's the next must-have item or you think you really want it. It's really taught me to think twice about a purchase.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm talking to some people about this and how really, like the fact that I just never go shopping ever. Like now I'm desperately, although this shirt is really nice, it's one of my nice things that I have. Like in general, I really like got no clothes. If I had to actually clean up my closet from all the things that I don't even use, I would take 2/3 of it. I will also like keep it there to make me feel like on my clothing situation. But like you just don't go shopping. You don't like it's a so you don't.
Yeah.
I think
don't spend time in shopping, like in Australia we call them shopping centres, here mall. I don't really I can probably count the amount of times on my hand in a year I go to the mall, and it is when I feel like, gosh, we need some new clothes. We'll go to Galleria or Beach Walk or something like that. But in Australia, it was like every week you're in the shopping centre because that's where you do your food shopping, and that's where you I guess it's more the food shopping that brings you there, right? It's like, oh, we've got to go to groceries, and you end up having a look in Cotton On, or you have a look here. And you really don't do that in Bali. It has to be a conscious effort to say, I need to go shopping, or I want to go shopping for this to get it, because our little food store, it's just food, and lots of our stuff we just get delivered to home anyway.
I totally agree. It's I think just coming to Bali, you really shed that life. And do you think, I feel like Bali is the place where you can reinvent yourself in a way?
Yeah, in 2 ways. I've seen the extreme of it, that I think being an expat, we all know there are some really super crazy people here, right? And I think that some people want to run away from who they are in their old life, and you could come here and say you're whoever you want to be. Nobody really questions. If you say, oh, I was a doctor back in Australia, nobody says, show me your PhD. So and so there are, I think that's one thing to be careful of when you come here is I find myself to be a really good reader of people. So if I detect a bit of that, I kind of stay away straight away. But you can definitely reinvent your life in the way that, if you're not happy, like I wasn't happy with how fast the kids' lives was going before our eyes, and I wasn't happy that school was the be all and end all. And Bali really helped us to be able to change all of that, and make me feel like we're really savoring the time with the kids, and that I feel like I have a really great work-life balance. And you can reinvent those ways. You learn so much from being surrounded by so many different nationalities. So of course by the Balinese, but then also there's just people from all over the world doing the most interesting things here. I love learning about how different people are making money, their different life stories, what brought them to Bali. And equally, I've seen the same amount of people who have come here and tried it and it hasn't worked, and they've had to leave pretty quickly. And
why do you think those people, it didn't work for them?
So somebody told me early on when we moved here, they said, I can't even remember who told me it. I think it was a long-term expat, said, Mother Bali either embraces you or chews you up and spits you out. And honestly, I've seen it over and over since we've been here. I think maybe if you're coming here to think, I don't know, if you're coming here to think, oh, I'm coming maybe for the money, like I'm going to make a fortune, or maybe if it doesn't work because you've romanticized what life is going to be like in your head. But yeah, sometimes I think it's just not a match. Some people are just not a match for Bali. You've got to have so much patience.
It's a bit like
when you're living here and having to deal with normal day-to-day stuff like a leaking roof or whatever. You have to have so much patience with that. There's always going to be the language barrier to some degree, and the rubber time that punctuality is not really what it is in Australia. So there's many times where I have a meeting booked for 11 o'clock and it doesn't start until 12. I'm still always the first at everything because it's so ingrained into me from growing up in Australia that 5 minutes early is 5 minutes late kind of mentality. And then I'm like, why do I come to these things on time? Like no one is ever on time. But yeah, I think you have to come into it with a really realistic view of that it's not Julia Roberts' Eat, Pray, Love. And you have to come into it not just looking at somebody's Facebook pictures or Instagram and thinking that you're seeing the full picture from that. People look at me and they see me at all these different resorts and at all these different things, and they're like, I want to come over and live your life. And I'm like, okay, well, I built that business for 6 years before I ever moved to Bali. And 3 of those years, I barely took a cent from the business. I just kept putting it all back in and worked another job. And see what you're seeing me doing. A lot of that is actually my job.
Yeah.
So you can't compare my Instagram pictures to what your life is going to look like in Bali. So I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I hear, I'm in a few Facebook groups of women in Bali, and they're like, oh, I just want to come for the yoga and the meditation. And it's all very Eat, Pray, Love. And I'm like, okay, you just need, and just, I love that also exists in Bali, and it provides it, but it's not all butterflies and rainbows,
No.
A lot of it is not, and it's just, I think people just, obviously they want to come here because they think it's easy, and actually it's way harder to live in Bali than it is in the Western world.
Definitely for some aspects. I always say, I would have loved to have been living here when I had little babies, though, because my memory of being so tired when I had little babies, and then still having to clean and cook and trying to go and exercise with the baby, and the baby would start screaming, so you don't exercise. I would have loved to have been here when the babies were little. But there are things that are way harder here than what they are in the Western world. For example, if you want to get ingredients, you know what it's like. You've got to go to this shop for this and this shop for this and get that bit delivered. And it's not like Woolworths or Coles where you can go in and pretty much get everything.
I think that there is a lot of other challenges here than people don't realize. That one thing is to be on holidays. And I think, I also came here for holidays as well. And I was like, I love it here. And then I ended up moving here. And obviously, being on holidays is not the same as living here. There's other challenges, and culturally there's other things that, especially with Australians, in other cultures they get it more, but in Australia I think in Australia things are pretty squeaky clean. Oh, you have to get permission from these people. Oh, you have to do this. Oh, you go to the bank.
Oh, I've got to pay that fee. What exactly is that for?
What do I have to pay this for, and what is this I have to pay the other thing for? There's a really big weave of things that happen here that until you move here and you live here, you don't realize. how the culture works, because at the end of the day, we're in a different culture, and we can't, some things like culture that I just cannot get my head around it. But I speak to either Balinese or Indonesian, they're like, it's just the way it is. They're just
Yeah,
not questioning. And
that's how it is. There's no explanation. It's like, that's just what happened.
yeah, that's it. And we're like, you just can't believe it. But you have to adapt to that as well and accept it, because if you can't, you're gonna have a real terrible time here.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. That's what I've seen some people coming in and going, oh, that can't happen, or that's not right. And that's exactly right. You have to understand where, you are still a visitor, right? As much as you can live here and Bali is your home, at the end of the day, you're a visitor. And yeah, you have to accept. A really good example of this that I know that when I told my friends this back home, they were like, what? That's crazy. The first villa we lived in had 2 temples within our villa. And so the landowner had a key to our gate, not to our actual house bit, but a key to our gate. And he would just let himself in. He never told you when he was coming, right? And he just let himself in and come and decorate the temples and put the offerings and pray. And a lot of our house was glass walls. So, so many times I'd find myself like getting out of bed, like in my underwear, and then be, oh, Pack, good morning.
Good morning.
Because you just never knew. It could be morning, it could be afternoon, it could be, there was no announcement, there was no heads up text or anything like that. And he would just arrive, and sometimes he would talk to us and sometimes he wouldn't. But that's a big, like, something like that would never happen in Australia, right? It would just never be a thing. But
no, if I had privacy, Bali's probably don't.
Actually, and that is true. If you want privacy, everybody knows everything you do.
I had people come in and get what's the name of that big jackfruit from my garden, and I'll be just walking and they'll just stand up and start hacking on my tree. I'll go, oh, hi.
Hi there. Yeah, it is true. They're very familiar in that way. Or even like out on my street here, everybody will know where I'm going or what I'm doing, and if they don't, they just ask me because they want to know. Why are you dressed like that? Where are you going? Why do you have a suitcase? Where are you going? Yeah, I think those things, like, we think it's funny, but I can see where, coming from a different culture, or especially coming from Australia, where you would just be like, whoa, that is so intrusive. And then, of course, there's the other flip of the coin, is knowing when to be generous and not to be generous. So my first landowners taught me a lot. The wife, actually, they owned a lot of property in Sanur. Like, they are in by no means poor. Like, they would have more money than us, But she also had this little shop down on the beach in Sanur with massage tables and sold markety stuff. And one day I was walking and I see her like bartering with this tourist over 5,000, 50 cents, and this back and forth around. And anyway, the next time she come to my house, I was like, boo, why you bother with 5,000? That's nothing to you. If you want the job, you should just take the job. And she goes, Karlie, this is the thing. She said, when you Australians come here, you're actually poor, but you all act like you're very rich. And she goes, Balinese, you never know. Some poor, some rich, but we will always act like we're poor. I was like, actually, and then I kind of looked a bit closer, and you really start to see that, yes, there are some very poor, and especially now, Indonesians. But I probably never realized how many really rich Indonesians there were until I traveled to Jakarta and was like, this wealth is overwhelming in some areas, and then that could be right next door to a slum where it's very poor. So I think that's as an Australian, that's quite eye-opening. That we kind of think Australians, you see them come over and they're like, this is why everybody loves Aussie guests, right? Because they're spending and spending and spending, and I'll help you. But of course, it is more Indonesian in culture that you never let on if you have a lot of money. So sometimes you're helping and helping and helping people that have a lot more money than you do. But I always think that that's so funny because it's really, have you found that as well? Like
Yeah,
that's
absolutely. Like I lived in my old house for 5 years, and literally, like my neighbors were super like really like way wealthier than you know. But they have the little shop, they sell coconut. You think they're doing well, okay? Believe me, they're getting a lot of money every month from all these different things, So I don't even know why they have this tiny little shop here that makes them no money. Like
I know that's exactly what I used to say to my landowner. Like, why are you down there bartering over a $5 massage? And she's like, oh, that's just how it is,
Good.
Yeah. We will never say that we have money. And then it made me go, oh, okay. It really opened my eyes to then looking and realizing that there is a real disparity, but nobody will ever say they have lots of money.
Yeah, that's true. No, I completely agree with you. You only realize this after you live here, and then you're like, hold on 1 second. So you're like, $50,000. I'm like, how did that happen?
I know. Well, what, is that an iPhone 12 you're holding? Like, yeah. So it's made me a little bit smarter around those kind of things. But I always remember her saying that to me because it was a real light bulb moment that I was like, oh, okay.
So I just want to have two more questions to ask you. First of all, why do you, because I think to live in Bali, you have to choose to be, it's like a marriage, no? Living in Bali. You choose every day to be here.
Yeah. Why?
To be married for a long time. So you
to be married to Bali. Why am I married to Bali? No, Bali is one of those places. I have a friend that is a single mom, and she, not at the moment because of Corona, but her and her daughter pretty much full-time travel. And she explains it in such a way that I relate to. She said every now and then when we're traveling, we love exploring all of these new places, but every now and then we find a spirit town, she calls it. And she said it's just one of those places where you go and visit and it just feels like home, or you just can picture yourself there. And I really loved that explanation because I've only really probably had that feeling maybe in about 2 places, which one was Bali. I always had that feeling with Bali. And then Hoi An in Vietnam, I really got that feeling there. I really got that feeling like, yeah, I could definitely see myself having a life here. And so Bali was the first time I ever got that feeling, and been traveling here from young. And I even remember before Bali Buddies, or even when we were just tourists, that feeling of landing maybe on our 5th or 6th trip and just feeling like, not the excitement of when you're seeing a brand new place, but that feeling of like, oh, this is my spot. This is where I feel it. This is where I feel really alive. And that was Bali for me. And luckily for me, it also was for Brady, my husband, because otherwise I do see it sometimes where one partner loves it more than the other. And I think that would be incredibly difficult. And the kids have always known Bali since babies. And kids, I find, are just so much more adaptable than us adults. They can adapt to we could go back to Australia tomorrow and they would adapt way quicker than what Brady or I would be able to adapt to moving back. So yeah, I think that's why I chose Bali, because it's a place where I really feel that connection to it. I feel the most alive when I'm here. I feel the most creative when I'm here. I love the locals. I have a lot of local friends. I love local banter. I love hearing their stories. And of course it affords us a really nice life here. which once again I'll say is not about money, because we earn nowhere near what we earned in Australia living in Bali, but we love our lives, so much more with this more relaxed atmosphere than when we were, both working full-time jobs and so it definitely is not about money. It's about that feeling of, I guess, being home. I always love that quote. Go to where you feel the most alive, and for us, I guess it's Bali.
And what the last question is like, what tips would you give someone that have been toying about with the idea of moving here, and now, especially with Corona, they're thinking maybe this is the time to change my life? What tips would you have said, okay, I want to move to Bali?
So first of all, there's the practical side that you have to be ready for. Like, visas are just a huge deal that you can't take lightly here. And I've seen lots of people get themselves into a lot of trouble from not realizing how strict Indonesia is on their visa rules. So you need to sort out your visa. Insurance, health insurance, just over the last 2 weeks, I've just seen awful cases where foreigners couldn't get treatment because they didn't have insurance and they didn't have the money to pay for it. And, some of them have died. So insurance and visas are just your number one. You need to sort that out. And if you can't afford either of those, you can't come to Bali. The next thing is having money. Like, don't come over here and you need to have some money behind you so that it affords you some time to look at maybe investing in a business or setting up your own business, or maybe trying to look for work. Looking for work, we both know, is really hard. It's not impossible to get a job here as a foreigner, but it's probably the closest thing to impossible. There's not really a lot of jobs for foreigners to work legally here, so you either have to set up your own thing. The whole digital nomad thing, of course, is happening, and as we both know, it's a grey area where there are hundreds of digital nomads here making money online. Is it 100% legal? Not really. Do the authorities know what's happening? I guess so. There's co-working spaces everywhere. Do people talk about it publicly if they are a digital nomad? Not really. So it's that grey area. So you really need to get your head around the practicalities, and even practical things like, if I have a bank account in my home country, how am I getting money out here? Is it going to cost me a fortune? Because I can go to an ATM, but if you use an Australian bank card here at an ATM, it costs you $15 every withdrawal, and the maximum you can get out is $300. So that adds up to a lot of money. So the practicalities of knowing how you're going to access your money here, and little things like, I'm still discovering things now. I don't know if I've told you this one, Shayla, but it always used to cost me a fortune if I had to call the bank back in Australia or Medicare or anything that is not an internet-based. So I found an app the other day called Rebtel, and for $5 USD a month, you can just call any Aussie number at all for as long as you want.
Just use Skype.
Do you use Skype? Well, yeah, I tried that and it did not work. Anyway, that was a life changer for me. So little things like that. The second thing is you've got to talk to people who have done it before you, from your own country, because if you're from Germany, talk to someone from Germany who's been living here. And if you're from Australia, talk to someone from Australia who's been living here, because those kind of inside tips are just invaluable when you've got someone to ask about things. And the other thing is, do not ever commit to long-term accommodation when you haven't seen it with your own eyes.
A great piece of advice. Yes.
Yeah, because it will never be what it looks. It'll never be what it looks like in the pictures. You need to consider things like, who are your neighbours? Do they burn rubbish? And because we've been in situations where neighbours have burnt rubbish, and then every afternoon your house is just full of smoke. There's nothing you can do about it. That's their land.
It's like having, for example, open living or open bathrooms. One thing is to come and do it for 5 days on a holiday, and another thing is to live daily with that. So, yeah, so sad.
Yeah, checking those things out, knowing how your electricity works, knowing, there's so many of those little practical things that before you even romanticize it in your head about, oh, I'm going to go live in Bali and do yoga every day and drink coconuts, you've got to get the practicalities down. How are you going to get around the island is another big one, and making sure if you are riding a motorbike or you are driving a car that you have the right licenses.
And wear a helmet, please.
And wear a helmet. So there's the practicalities are your biggest ones to tick off. The rest can be easy, like where you're going to do yoga or where you're going to shop or, what you're going to eat. That's not even a concern. That's easy. It's just those really big practicalities: money, visa, insurances, transport, accommodation. You really need to get clear in your head of what those processes look like before you jump on a plane and come over. And it always helps to have trusted expat friends and trusted local friends, because some problems are expat problems and some other problems you need to talk to the locals and get their advice on how to deal with things, and making sure who you're talking to knows what they're talking about. But having those trusted people, I have a slew of trusted people that I ask for different things if I'm not sure on something, to get me clarity, because there's a lot of grey area when it comes to Indonesia.
Yeah, no, I think also those kind of contacts you do grow over time. Sometimes you don't know anyone, but when I came to Bali, I didn't know a single soul. But over time we met people and friends and locals, and then we always know who to go to. But I think sometimes like people like me that when we just turn out like such a.
I think now with the age of social media, it's so much easier to even get access to people than it was even 5 years ago. I just joined Clubhouse this week and trying to get my head around it. But anyway, we hosted a room last night on all things Bali, and there was a lot of questions on moving to Bali and things like that. Now, these are people I don't know, but I gave them all the information that I knew, and they could verify that I know what I'm talking about, because I was like, you can check my website and my Instagram and my this and that. But you can get access to people a lot more easily now than say 5 years ago. So use those tools to ask questions.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Karlie, for all your amazing tips, your insight into living and working here, and for sharing a little bit about what you do and your life here in Bali. It's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure, and look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Yes, me too. Thank you, Karlie. And you guys can have a look at Bali Buddies in the show notes later on.